I'm Alan McKinnon. I'm a Professor of Logistics and the author of the Decarbonizing Logistics book. In this book, I provide advice to companies and to governments on how to reduce carbon emissions from logistics. To do this, I make use of a framework that I've developed. I call it the 10C framework to show companies or governments how systematically to reduce emissions from freight transport operations and from warehousing. I call it my 10C framework because it's in 10 stages and each stage begins with the letter C. So we start with corporate motivation, where managers are encouraged actually to take action. The second one is to calculate, to measure how much greenhouse gas is emitted by logistical activities. The third is committing to targets to reduce those emissions. Then we move on to consider all the options that companies have for decarbonising their operations. And the good news is that many of these options are mutually reinforcing. From then, companies have to consider collaboration, because the feeling these days is that to achieve the really deep reductions in emissions, companies will have to work together and share their logistics assets. Companies also have to work out the cost effectiveness of these decarbonisation measures, because obviously companies want to do this in a way that minimises expenditure. They may also have to engage in what we call carbon offsetting, because if companies feel that they cannot meet their targets by actually decarbonising their operations, they may have to pay other organisations to do it on their behalf, which is what we call carbon offsetting. So having done all that analysis, the companies would then choose a set of initiatives which would deliver their carbon reduction targets. They would then implement that plan, they would observe the results, and in the light of that, they may want then to recalibrate their strategy. So we put in place feedback mechanisms, and we initiate a learning process so that companies build up an understanding of how they should be decarbonising their logistics. And currently, most companies and governments are at a fairly early stage in that process. When companies complete this process, what they often discover is that they don't simply cut their carbon emissions, but they save money in the process. Because there's general agreement, I think, that at the moment we're in what we might call the low-hanging fruit phase of logistics decarbonisation, where many of the measures that are applied can actually be justified on commercial grounds. They often offer quite a quick payback on any investment that has to be made. So companies have both an environmental and an economic incentive for doing this.